Hello, I'm Buck from SoCal Motorcycle Services, and in the video today I'm going to show you how I do a pre-purchase inspection on a motorcycle that someone's going to buy. So we'll call this how to buy a used motorcycle. What we're going to use for the example of the motorcycle that we're going to inspect is this Honda. It's a 2021 Honda CB 300R. And it's a nice bike. This would be a great bike for a beginner to maybe an intermediate level. The handling is really good, and it's not fast. It's quick, but it's kind of slow, but it's perfect for someone who's learning how to ride a motorcycle. Of course, it's built by Honda, which means it's going to be quality. Last for a very, very long time. So, you want to buy a motorcycle. Once you find the motorcycle, several ways to find one. You can find one on Craigslist, OfferUp, eBay even, but you want to go and inspect it. First thing you want to do is you want to make sure that they have a clean title in their hand. That's a title that doesn't have any liens on it. It's not salvaged. They have the actual title so that they can, if you're going to buy it, you get the title right there. You also want to check the registration on the bike, because if the registration isn't current, you're responsible to pay for all the back fees on the bike, and they could be extensive. If you have a bike that's 5 years old and hasn't been registered in 5 years, you have to pay 5 years back fees. Could cost more than the bike. A good way to look is to find out if the registration's paid. You can go to the DMV website, type in the license plate, and it'll tell you if there's any fees owed. You look at the registration card that they should have, and it'll tell you if the registration's current. And for a quick way, if you look at the license plate in California, it tells you that this bike's good until February of 23. So the registration is going to have to be renewed this month. So what you want to do is just make sure it's like this. Just be aware that when you register this bike, you're going to have to pay fees in this upcoming month. Okay, so now let's get to it. The first thing you want to do is you want to walk up to the bike and look at it. Does it move you? Do you like the bike? Don't buy a bike that you don't feel anything about, because you'll just regret buying it. So we look at the bike. I walk up to the bike and take a quick walk around. I look to see if there's any leaks, any damage, any crash damage, any signs of abuse. And this one's quite dirty, but everything's pretty much good. You want to check under the pegs just to make sure that there's no crash damage. This bike had optional frame protectors installed, which is a very good idea. If the bike falls down, they'll take the damage and your bike won't suffer hardly any damage. You want to look and see what kind of extras they put on. I mentioned the crash sliders. This bike also has heated grips that he installed, which is very useful. It's nice to have warm heated grips, which also has a USB port so you can plug in your phone. It also comes with a phone holder. If you don't like it, you can just remove it. It's nice to have, though, especially when they throw it in for free. You want to come around both sides of the bike, front and back, side to side, and just look. And this bike is clean. There's no signs that it's ever been down. Next thing you want to do is check to make sure there's oil in the bike. On this bike and on most Japanese bikes, it has an oil window right here. You lift the bike up, straight up and down, and you'll see the oil level. The oil level is perfect. You want it to be 3/4 of the window. But this oil is quite dirty. The reason why the bike's in the shop today is because I'm going to do a full service on it. You also want to check, this is your rear master cylinder reservoir. The fluid's starting to get a little bit discolored. It's supposed to be clear. You're supposed to change your brake fluid every 2 years. You want to walk around, feel the brake. If the brake feels good, you're pretty much good to go. If the lever goes all the way to the bar, it means you have a lot of air in your lines and you have to bleed it. This one's solid, very good. You want to feel the clutch lever. See if it moves freely. This is a very simple clutch. And you want to check to see if it's adjusted. You just pull the cable and work the lever, and you want about that much play. Because if your clutch is too tight, your clutch will not disengage and you'll burn out your clutch really fast. You can do a quick, simple adjustment right up here to make sure that there's... I'm going to take out a couple turns of the play when I do the service, but that's actually that's good enough. Then you want to check your tires. You want to make sure that there's no cracking in the tires. The tires aren't too old. There'll be a date code with 4 numbers. It'll have the week the tire was made and the year the tire was made. Since this is a relatively new bike, we know that the tires aren't very old, so they're not old. Then we check for wear, make sure there's still good tread left. There's no uneven wear anywhere, and these tires are good to go. They'll probably last another 5,000 miles. Then we come around to the back. Same thing. This tire is a little bit more worn. You can tell it's flat spotting, which means he doesn't really turn very much or very often. But rear tires typically wear twice as fast as front tires. So you'll get 2 rear tires for every 1 front usually. This still has a lot of life left, about half the life left that the front has, which is to be expected, but there's no cracking. It's in good shape. Next thing you want to check is the chain. This chain is very rusty. It's a little loose. It tells you right on the bike how you should adjust the chain for free play. And the chain isn't that bad. It just looks terrible. If someone bought this bike, I would have them change the chain, and I'm probably going to have the owner have me replace the chain. You don't necessarily have to change sprockets when you do the chain. Just check them out and make sure they're worn. You usually get 1 set of sprockets for every 2 chains. That's a good rule of thumb. And just don't forget you have a front sprocket and a rear sprocket. Big thing, you want to make sure that the fork seals aren't leaking. So you come to the fork and you rub your finger on the slider part. These are inverted forks, so the bottoms slide. On conventional forks, the shiny part would be on the top. But you run your finger in and you see if there's any nicks. There's no nicks on this fork slider, and there's no oil. Leaking oil seals can be pretty dangerous because they usually leak oil onto the brake disc, and when you oil brakes, they don't really stop you. So if you see an oil leak on your forks, you got to replace the seals. And it could be about a $300 job, so if they're leaking, doesn't mean that you should walk away from the bike, but use that as a negotiation point to lower the price. Forks look good. We went over the chain. Now what we're going to do is we're going to turn the bike on. The display comes on, and it tells you that the total mileage is, it has 2,865 miles. That's basically a new bike. Buy it if it's this new and it's a good price. So you turn it on, make sure you're in neutral, you pull in the clutch, and you start the bike. You want to listen to see if the battery is strong, and the bike starts right up. You want to see if there's any trouble when it's starting. This one started right up. You can hear it's smooth. It's running perfectly. Give it a couple revs. The engine sounds perfect. Then you kill it, turn the bike off. So the bike runs really well. You want to, there's a sticking point with buyers and sellers. Most sellers don't want you to ride their bike. Some sellers will let you ride the bike, but you have to give them the cash for the bike, and then if you don't like it, they'll give you the cash back. If you can ride it, give it a ride, see how it feels, shift through all the gears, feel the brakes. A lot of times, like I say, they won't do that, and if you are inexperienced, if this is your first bike, bring someone with you who knows how to ride, have them ride it. Now, if the owner doesn't let you ride it, don't be upset about that. It's a thing. A lot of people don't want you to, because people call up and they said, I want to take your bike for a test ride, and they just use it to go for a joyride without intentions of buying it. What you want to do in that situation is have the owner hop on the bike, go out to the street, and you watch him shift through all the gears, see if everything sounds good, everything works well, and you'll be good. Bringing that up, let's turn the bike back on. Start it. Now's a good time to check the lights. You want to look at the headlight, make sure that high beam, that's the low beam, and the high beam work. And on Hondas, most of the time they have separate lights where the low beam's on all the time and the high beam comes on when you need it. You want to check your turn signals to make sure they work both sides. We got one side, then we got the other side. Those are working fine. You want to test the horn. Horn works. Horns on motorcycles aren't rude. I use my horn a lot. People, if someone sees me when I'm riding, I give them a little quick beep on the horn, and it grabs their attention, and they say, oh, there's a motorcycle around. Now let's walk around the back. Make sure that the running light is on. When you have a bike, there's always going to be a light on the back. That's how that's the running light, so that people can see you. You want to make sure it gets brighter when you hit the front brake. That works. And the rear brake. That works. While back here, we're going to test the turn signals. That works. That works. You want to check that the license plate light is working. And that's right there if you can see it. That lights up your license plate. If you ride at night and your license plate light is out, they're going to pull you over. In California, we're in California. So in California, you need a reflector on the back. If you remove the reflector, the police can pull you over for that. So what I do is if you want to remove the reflector, get those reflector buttons for your license plate. You have to have a reflector on the bike. They use it to pull you over. Now while we're back here, you want to inspect the brake pads on the rear. These are the brake pads. They've barely been used. Plenty of life left in them. You want to look at the disc. The disc is fine. Then we're going to walk over to the front and look at the front brakes. We'll kill the bike. Okay. Same thing. You look at the brake pads to see, and sometimes it's hard to see, but this one has great brakes. Lots of brake pad left. The rotors aren't scratched up. They just have a little wear on them, but they last a very long time. If you treat your brakes correctly and replace the pads when needed, the brake discs will last almost the life of the bike, or many, many thousands of miles. So make sure you test the brakes. Also, while we're looking at the wheel, you want to check the tire pressures. On a bike that you're first buying, you want to check the tire pressures about once a week, once every 2 weeks, just to see how they bleed down. Tires tend to bleed down if you just let them sitting, so you want to make sure you have proper tire pressure. A good rule of thumb is 36 pounds in the front and back are about what you're looking for. Bikes vary, but I find that that's pretty good for street riding. So this bike would get a pass for me. I would definitely tell my customer to buy it. If you have any questions, ask the seller what he knows, the history of the bike, when the oils was last changed, when a professional looked at it. It's always a good idea to have a professional shop look at your bike. It doesn't cost very much, and it saves you peace of mind. If you find a shop like me, you call me up, I'll go out with you to look at the bike, negotiate a little bit with the seller, and make sure you get the best price possible. There's always negotiation. It's very rare that the seller won't come down. One mistake that people make that kind of irritates sellers, and you don't want to irritate sellers because an irritated seller is a stubborn seller. Don't negotiate on the bike before you see it. It's considered pretty rude, and it makes a lot of people mad. They would rather not even talk to that person because it just sounds like you're trying to get the best deal possible, and you don't care about the bike, you just care about the money. So that's about it. This is a great bike. I'm going to do a service on it, and when I do the service, I call it, there's a 5K service and a 10K service. About every 5,000 miles, I do full oil change. I only use synthetic oil. I make sure the brakes are bled, lube and adjust the chain, go over some critical bolts like the head exhaust bolts tend to loosen up sometimes, so I just make sure they're torqued to the right torque. Every 2 years I replace the brake fluids, and then this has a radiator, so this is a liquid cooled motorcycle. You have to check the coolant and replace the coolant. I replace coolant every 2 years. So the 5,000 mile service is basic oil change. 10,000 mile service, we replace the fork oil, torque even more bolts to make sure everything's good, check the wheel bearings, and that's one thing you can also do is just roll the bike. The bike feels smooth, not notchy, nothing wiggles. Your forks, your bearings are usually pretty good. On low mileage bikes, wheel bearings last a long time. So now let's talk about the battery. When I buy a bike, I buy a lot of bikes. So when I buy a bike, the first thing I do is I change the oil, just so that I know what oil's in it and when it's been changed. It gives me a baseline. Now it's my bike. I usually change the brake fluid, but that's because I'm really anal and I know how to do it. That's not necessary. Just make sure that brake fluid's topped up. I lube the chain, make sure the chain's adjusted. Every service, have the chain lubed and adjust it. That's about it. This is a really clean example. Oh, and one more thing. When I buy a new bike, motorcycle batteries don't last a long time. Don't be hurt if your battery conks out a couple months after you buy a bike. They're very fragile. They're replaceable. The best thing you can do is buy a battery tender and keep the bike on the battery tender if you have a garage. That way, you know the bike's charged, the battery keeps maintained, it'll last a lot longer. Good rule of thumb is motorcycle batteries last about 2 years. Now, if we turned on the bike electrics and we go to press the start button, the lights and everything are working, but you hear click, 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 that means the battery's low. If the battery's low, Don't have to run away from it. That's another negotiating point. You negotiate the cost of a new battery. Half the time, you just have to charge the battery. Most of the time, once the battery starts going dead, you're going to need a new battery. So just budget a new battery and service with what you're paying for the bike. It'll pay dividends in the long run. And then I noticed on this bike has ABS, anti-lock brake system. That's very good for new riders. It makes it very hard to lock up the brakes, if not impossible, especially in inclement weather. When a road gets wet, it gets kind of slippery, and if you're not experienced at braking smoothly, it can help out a new rider. Gas for a bike, I tend to only use high octane, the 91, the super gas. It's a small tank, so you're only saving like $1 if you go for the cheap stuff. Motorcycles are high performance vehicles. They have high compression. You want high octane gas. And then the higher octane gases usually have better additive packages that help your fuel system keep clean. Another thing to check is just make sure that the seat's not ripped or torn. This one's perfect. This is definitely buy this bike if the price is right kind of a deal. If you have any questions, let me know. If I missed anything, let me know. On older bikes, you might want to go into compression testing. This bike obviously doesn't need compression tested. It's fine. This is a fuel injected bike. They can sit for a while without having to have the fuel system cleaned. If it had a carburetor, carburetors only can sit for about 8 to 9 months without being cleaned. So if the bike won't start and it's carbureted, more than likely the carburetor has to be cleaned. But carburetors aren't bad. I like carburetors, but you can't find very few bikes, if any, these days have carburetors. It's all fuel injected, all computer controlled. Have a great day. Talk to you soon.